Hey everybody, this is Townsend. I'm a singer, songwriter, musician, and mental health advocate, and I started the You're Not Alone project and podcast to help educate, spread awareness, and simply help you feel a little less alone, no matter what you're going through. Thank you so much for tuning in to Season 2 of You're Not Alone with Townsend. Be sure to click the follow button and share these stories. You can also watch the interviews on our YouTube under Townsendtmusic. You can also keep up with the journey if you follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Townsendtmusic. Every like, follow, and share helps us continue to change lives. Good morning, everybody. It is You're Not Alone with Townsend. I'm really excited today. I've got a special guest, Dr. Song. I have seen her on social media, and I love what she's doing. So she's got Healthy Kids, Happy Kids, and she's kind of integrating like a functional medicine type outlook for parents. And it's almost like conventional pediatrics and functional medicine all in one. Am I wording that correctly?
You are. That's perfect.
Awesome. Perfect. And I love it so much. I love the holistic view that you have. And so I wanted to have you on just to kind of chat about it. I have a ton of followers, obviously, that have children and want to dive more into that. But we focus more on mental health. So I was so excited to get your outlook on that. So I appreciate you joining me. Now, you're located in California.
I am. Yep. In the
Very
Bay
good.
Area, Northern California.
Well, let's go ahead and hop in. Okay, let's introduce you. Who is Dr. Song? What is your specialty? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, you got it. I'm
All
Elisa
right.
Song. I grew up in New Jersey. I'm a Jersey girl, and
Okay.
I made my way out to California for my undergrad here at Stanford. Kind of hopped around the country, well, coast to coast, really. Stanford. Then I did my med school at NYU. Back at UCSF for my pediatrics residency, and I stayed here.
I love that.
So you explained perfectly what I do. I am a conventionally trained pediatrician. I've been trained at some amazing, academic centers, um, and there is also a way to expand that knowledge to an even more comprehensive approach for our kids. So I integrate conventional pediatrics. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but I integrate conventional pediatrics with holistic nutrition, functional medicine, homeopathy, herbs. I actually do acupuncture on kids as well and teach parents how to use acupressure points and essential oils. So I kind of get the best of all worlds. And so it's a great way to practice. It's a great way to really see kids thrive.
Absolutely. I love that so much. And I love your social media. You get on and you give these little daily tips and these little just things that parents are striving for more information. And it's hard to find. You don't know what to believe. You get all this almost false news on the internet. You Google something and it's like you're dying. You could have
Yep.
a runny nose and it
Yes.
goes to you're dying. So I love that you do these little pinpoints for adults just on your social media. Hey, here's a little something for this. Here's a little something for this. Pay attention to these allergies. So I appreciate you going above and beyond and doing that. It's really
Oh,
neat to
thank you.
see. Yeah, absolutely. So
Yeah,
what
I mean,
got
I'm
you?
a mom too, so I'm all about practical tips.
Yes.
I only recommend what I actually do for my own kids and for my patients, and I make sure it's doable, and without fear, right?
I
We gotta
love
get rid of
that.
all the fear.
Absolutely. Now, how old are your kids?
My kids now they're tweens. They are 13 and 11, so a whole different set of challenges now than when they were
Yeah.
younger. It's all
Bless
good.
you. Bless you. Goodness, here comes the attitude and
All
the
right, the
cold
teen years.
shoulder. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Bless you. Okay, so what got you into pediatrics? Have you always known you wanted to work with children?
I did. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I've always known I wanted to work with kids. I mean, I was an avid babysitter. I loved playing with little kids, and I didn't really know what that meant because my mom, was an OBGYN, and so watching her growing up in the medical field, that was the last thing I wanted to do. I was like, I'm not going to be a doctor, and so I wasn't sure. I thought I was going to be a teacher. And then I really, for me, advocacy and making a difference on a broader scale is really important. So I kind of switched gears and I was going to become a civil rights lawyer.
Mhm.
And I actually did several internships in Washington, D.C. for the Children's Defense Fund. And I was going to be lobbying on Capitol Hill
Yeah.
and, fighting for education and healthcare rights for kids. And advocacy and, broader public policy is still a really important part of who I identify with and what I want to bring to the world. But I realized in college that I wouldn't really be working with children.
Yeah.
And, children bring me joy to see them day in and day out. And so I kind of pivoted gears and I went back senior year and I thought, you know what, this doctor thing, it's not too bad. So then I actually did all of my pre-med work my senior year at college and went on to become a pediatrician.
Wow, what an interesting story, and I love that. I love that you're into lobbying and advocating because children
Mhm.
can't do it themselves. We are their
Right,
voice, and so that
right.
is so honorable. I love it so much. I wanna focus on your holistic point of view. So for people that don't know, I feel like this is a term that's kinda coming around more and more. So what does holistic actually mean, and why did you choose that route?
Yeah. So, that's a great question because holistic can mean a lot of different things to different people. And really and truly, all pediatricians should be holistic, meaning that we should look at this child in front of us in the context of their whole family, friend group, social community group. And so we can't take that child in isolation, right? Just like you said, I mean, they really don't have their own voice. And so we need to take that child in the context of how they're living and who they're living with. Now, holistic also means though, and I've moved more towards saying integrative because it's really this merging of what we the benefits of conventional pediatrics. We know interventions like antibiotics can be life-saving, but now we also understand, well, gosh, there are all of these unintended consequences that now we're finding out from antibiotics, that we in integrative pediatrics and functional medicine know how to mop up so we can get the benefits of using antibiotics when they're absolutely necessary, have alternatives when maybe there are some other options, and when antibiotics are necessary, clean up the gut microbiome, which is so much about, we're going to be diving into mental health in kids, but when we think about mental health in kids and adults, we have to think of it as not just a brain problem, but a gut brain issue. So really, really so important to take this integrative, holistic approach, especially when it comes to mental health. And we know the pandemic has just spiraled the mental health crisis that already existed for children and teenagers, and it's just getting worse. And as we're recording this, May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and Children's Mental Health Awareness Week is coming up, and it's a an especially um, poignant time for me because my best friend from college, her birthday is coming up in May, and she died by suicide in her early 20s.
Mm.
And so, this is a month of remembrance and a month of awareness and a month of, really trying to celebrate the life that we have and teaching children and parents how to do that. It's so important.
Yeah, I love that so much, so much, and that's one thing, you know, I found playing music. I do music full time. And I found that we all really want the same thing, right? We want to be happy, we want to be healthy. And I feel like mental health is such a big point of that. But you made a great point. It has to do with your whole body. And I actually interviewed somebody not too long ago that talked about the same thing you just mentioned. It's not just a brain, it is your
Mm,
whole body. And you have to look at the whole body and kind of evaluate each part of that. So
yeah.
I love that you look at it that way as well, because some people just throw medicine at it, which of course is needed in some cases.
Mhm.
But I love that you like the holistic view. You look at the whole person, their environment, everything that has to do with that. So I really respect that for sure. I want to personally thank you for taking the time to listen to these conversations. It truly means so much. We've changed so many lives for the better, and we want to continue doing so throughout 2023. This project is made possible by sponsors and patrons. So if you'd like to help keep the You're Not Alone project going and hearing these amazing stories, we would love for you to join the family at patreon.com/TownsendTmusic. Just for signing up, you'll get free merch, discounts, and behind the scenes patron only footage. Not only of my music, but of each episode. That's right, so each guest on every episode answers a few more questions that only patrons will be able to watch and listen to. So head on over to patreon.com/TownsendTmusic and let's continue changing lives. Let's go ahead and hop into children and mental health. This is a huge topic, something I get asked questions about all the time. Like I said, a lot of my listeners have kids and they are just at a loss. They have no idea.
Yeah.
We always hear that kids are resilient. Oh, they'll be fine. They're resilient. Oh, that happened. It was tragic, but they're resilient. So, when and what should we pay attention to maybe regarding mental health with young kids? Because that's about all people know is they're resilient, and
Yeah.
that's it.
And, this idea of resilience, we have to understand too that our children, um, and this is not to put any more, guilt on mamas than we already have,
Oh, sure.
but, but our children take cues from us, their parents, on how they should interpret what is going on around them. Right. And, as we're coming out of this pandemic, the pandemic has had silver linings for many. It's also had a lot of tragedies for many. And, children have taken a huge toll. Single moms, single working moms have taken a huge toll. And we know that for many children, the pandemic will become or is what's called an adverse childhood event, an ACE, right? And these ACEs, ACE, those traumatic events that happen during childhood can actually set the stage for increased risk for virtually all chronic health diseases as an adult. So it's really important to understand that even these quote traumas that we feel like, oh, kids are going to get over it, they're resilient. We want to make sure that we're paying attention to how children are responding. The first thing is really, that cliche saying that we have to, as parents, put our own oxygen mask on first. We have to learn how to be resilient ourselves, and that's something that we as children didn't necessarily learn.
Right.
Right. And so, it is really important as we're helping our children through their mental health struggles, that we look inside and think, well, what is it that's unresolved in me? What is it that I haven't learned how to process and manage so that then I can help my child process and manage? And what are some of the red flags that your child might be going through something that needs to be addressed? It's if you see a change that's not going away. I mean, we all have crabby days or anxious days or explosively angry days. I mean, we have those days, right?
Yeah.
That you notice that you're thinking, well, it's not, I thought it was just a phase, but now, a month later, 2 months later, 3 months later, they were so outgoing and, they had all of these friends and all of a sudden now they don't want to talk to anybody. They're in their room, they just want to read or they just want to be on their screen. Or, a kid who used to be maybe more fearful, wanting to stay home, more all of a sudden not wanting to do anything at home and being out, till all hours of the night, a change that you're like, well, it's different, right? And so then you want to just open up the lines of communication with your child. You want to ask questions, right? The other thing that, as we think about, the suicide attempts have gone up, since during the pandemic,
Sure.
for children, especially teenagers, teenage girls. And, we got to ask the questions, right? If you're really worried about your kids and your teenagers and you're worried that they're self-harming or that they're at risk for self-harming, you have to ask them, hey, look, are you thinking about hurting yourself? Have you thought about actually, ending your life? I mean, we want to be really direct for our teenagers, not for our little ones, right? Our
Sure.
littles are not
Sure.
really thinking, but I'm thinking more our teenagers because that's really where we're seeing this, this tragic, epidemic unfolding
Yeah.
in depression and anxiety. And we know that by the time kids are 18, I mean, almost half of them are going to be diagnosed with some sort of mental health disorder. So, we want to very early on, from the moment they're toddlers are talking or babies and frustrated, give them those emotion words and say, hey, look, oh, wow, I see you're really frustrated about not being able to do X, Y, and Z. How can I help? Let's see how we can work through this. Not fix it for them, but work with them to come up with solutions for themselves so they feel empowered that they know how to do that. That's a silly little thing. It's kind of thinking about putting the puzzle piece, into the shape sorter. But kids learn that they can overcome struggles from even that early stage,
Yeah.
right? They learn that they
Absolutely.
can do it within themselves and they don't need mommy or daddy to fix everything for them. Right.
Love
And
that.
that is very, very important to learn.
Yeah, I love that so much. I feel like a lot of parents get in that, especially my generation, my friends with a lot of kids, they wanna fix everything. They don't wanna
Mhm.
see their child hurt, and
I
it's
mean,
kinda like
it's so hard. I'm
yeah.
not gonna lie. It's like it's the hardest thing in the world to step back and especially if I mean, as kids get older and then, there are some kids who are not very kind, and you see your child, being the brunt of it, and it's so hard not to just sit there and want to say, well, that kid should have done blah blah blah, and try to and I'm going to talk to their mom, and
Yeah.
but
Oh,
the more we can help children learn the tools to advocate for themselves, to overcome their struggles successfully, even though it's hard. They learn that they can do the hard things, and that um, stress doesn't have to be terrible,
yeah.
right?
I love that so much. And it's going to happen through life. Stresses happen. So having those tools early on in your toolkit, as they call it, that you
Mhm.
can get out with age. I love that. And I think that's incredibly important. Okay. What are some of the most common things you see with children and mental health? The ones that come to my mind are um, fears, maybe some kind of attachment issue when they go to school and they have an attachment with their mom, the anxieties. But what is really the most common thing that you see in your practice?
I mean, you nailed it. I would say, the separation anxiety, which has to do with the attachment, the anxieties, perseverating on worries, and, the what ifs. I mean, that's very, very common. And it doesn't mean that there's something necessarily wrong with your child. It's when that attachment, separation anxiety, or when those obsessive, perseverative worries start to impact your child's ability to attend school or function, or be with their friends, that we really want to pay a lot closer attention. Even before they get to that point, though, then we want to, be aware if they're having trouble separating. Let's say in preschool, right? You think, okay, the first couple of weeks, sure, they're getting used to it, but then even the third week, fourth week, the second month, they're holding on to your legs, screaming, crying, and the teacher's peeling them off of you. And first we want to make sure they're in a safe environment, that this
Right.
is the right
Sure.
fit, that there's nothing going on with a peer in school. And if you kind of rolled out all of that, then we want to work with that school. I mean, most teachers are awesome in this way to plan out, okay, how can we help your child feel successful separating from you, even if it's just for a moment each day, a little longer each day. But I would say, this the overwhelm. Right, it's the overwhelm of whatever's going on, that is what I see very commonly, and that overwhelm can build up and up and up until, middle school. It's the friends and the social stuff, and the homework, and the whatever family pressures, or whatever it is. So there's this overwhelm. And then for kids who haven't learned how to get those tools to manage that, what's the most common thing that parents and kids do when they have stress or stressors? We avoid them, right?
Mhm.
Avoidance is our number one coping mechanism. And avoidance is the fastest way to have the elephant in the room get bigger, 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 until all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, how did we get here with my child? Or how did we get here with me? Right. And so, there's something that I call I don't call it this, it's called the optimal performance curve, the stress performance curve. And I talk to kids about it, I talk to parents about it, because stress in our society has become the new four-letter word, right?
Right.
Oh, you have stress. Oh my gosh, we don't want any stress in our life. That's
Right.
actually not true. Stress, a positive amount of stress, helps us to get stuff done, right?
Sure.
If we don't have the stress of a deadline, a stress of, oh, I have to do X, Y, and Z, I'm responsible for this, so I should get it done. I mean, would we ever get anything done? No, right? That's like we've all had deadlines where, you're like, oh, it's a month away, it's 2 months away, and you kind of wait, wait, wait. And then all of a sudden the week before, you're like, oh my gosh, right?
Oh, no,
Stress
absolutely.
kicks in,
I'm having
and then you
flashbacks of college.
that's right. And then you get it done, right? So this optimal performance curve, here on the bottom end, it's like this bell-shaped curve, okay, where this bottom here is the amount of stress, and the top here is your performance. So low stress, you're not performing very well, right? You get bored, you get apathetic, you're like, why bother with anything? You might feel depressed a little bit, right? Then we have a little more stress, that deadline's coming up, and all of a sudden you hit this sweet spot where you're like, okay, I'm in the zone. I'm
That's it.
focused. I'm getting stuff done, right? And that stress is actually um, pulling you towards success, right? Then, if you have the soccer tournament and, the school play and your homework and, parents getting divorced and friend drama, right? All of a sudden now you have stress way over here and now it's too much,
Yeah.
right? You get burnt out, you get tired, you get irritable, you get angry. So that is to just explain to parents and kids, stress isn't bad, right? We
Yeah.
want a healthy amount of stress, but it's how much stress. So if you're here on this level of like really high stress, low performance, what can you let go in your life? What busyness can we slow down on, right? And how can I manage that stress that I have more effectively? So I get back here to this kind of peak performance, like in the zone, right? That's where we've all had it, right? We're all like, okay, I'm cracking down, and you kind of pull out that exam, that final exam paper in like 2 hours, right? You're like, oh my gosh, how did I get that done, right? But you're in
Absolutely.
that flow state, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I feel like this may be just me, but I feel like stress has become so much more overwhelming since technology. I feel like now you've got, influences and whether positive or negative, I feel like mostly it's negative. You're comparing yourself. You're constantly, for adults, you're constantly on call 24/7. You can get emails, you can get texts,
Yeah,
you can get phone calls. Whereas it used to be you left work at work. But for kids, you're
yeah.
constantly looking at the screen and comparing. So would you say stress is even at a higher max, I guess, now with
Oh,
2023?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
1000%.
Mm.
Even some of the studies have shown that, we know, virtually all studies show that, kids or adults, when you get on your screen and scroll through your social media, you end up feeling worse than when you started,
Isn't
right?
that
About
crazy?
yourself, right? Your self-esteem kind of goes down. And, the one of the more recent studies found that there's sort of this spike in that kind of low self-esteem resulting from social media. And, it's in the younger years, and then sometime like the tween years, it gets a little better. And then, right as you're heading out of high school, that kind of older teenage years, it plummets, right? Your social, your self-esteem plummets and your
Yeah.
self-confidence plummets. Really most likely is a direct result of that social media, kind of that scrolling. And we know that the scrolling and the quick, that stimulation, the video games, all of that, it changes the way our brain gets wired. And so that we need to have this sort of quick, instant, I need that instant hit. I need that instant gratification. I need that instant feedback, and you see it. My nephew, he's awesome, but I remember, as a teenager going out to lunch with him and sitting there watching him, and he couldn't stop kind of, his whole body was kind of vibrating. And then of course there'd be like a ding, whatever, every like 2 seconds. And he's like constantly during lunch, like looking at his phone, typing back, looking. I'm like, hey, dude,
Yeah.
we're at lunch, right?
Yeah.
Your friends can wait. It's okay. Like
Yeah.
they're not going to hate you if you, take 5 minutes, 20 minutes to eat, right?
Yeah.
But that's what a lot of kids are doing. They're just used to this. And so when we think about facing our worries in a productive way, facing our worries and you getting those tools requires the ability to be still and process those worries, right? So if your brain is bzz, 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 and like constantly going, there's not a moment to be still and think about, okay, wow, what Johnny said to me was really impactful and it's really stressing me out. And, how do I manage it? Right. So
Yeah.
then we then push it to the back of our minds because we're just so busy with everything else. So I do think it is a big concern because our kids now, and adults too, right? You see it.
Mm.
And I'm not going to say I'm perfect.
Yeah.
I've had plenty of times where, I'm trying to get work done. And of course, like you said, you bring it home now because you have constant access to your emails and to your whatever. And my kids have been like, Mom, can you put your phone away? And I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, I gotta practice what I preach, right?
Exactly. Yeah, you get called out and you think, "Oh my gosh,"
Mhm.
and here I was. Yeah, absolutely, and I feel like of course, I'm speaking as an adult, but doing music and doing this podcast, you're always keeping up with the Joneses, and it's really interesting to hear you say, especially kids. I had this argument I won't say argument, we had this conversation on a family trip with my niece. She's 13, 14, like that teen age, and she really wants social media. And so we were telling her all the pros and cons of it, and we are like, "You're really not missing out but
Mhm.
she sees her mom and her aunts and uncles and all these people
Wow.
staring at their
Yep.
phones, so she feels left out. And then you try to explain, but really it doesn't make you feel good, and then you think, "Why am I on it all the time if it's just bringing down my so." It's a crazy cycle.
Yeah,
It's
it is.
addictive, but it's not a positive addiction.
No. And one of the things that my children now have phones, and I always thought I would wait till they were in 8th grade, but through the pandemic, they
Yeah.
started you know, going downtown with their friends
Sure.
at 10 and 12 years of age as a way to, keep in touch socially, connected, even when we were, in remote schooling. It was
Sure.
tough, right?
Yeah.
So they have phones. They don't have social media. And one of the things that we've implemented, and I think it's so helpful for parents and kids to do this, is just to say that the car is a cell phone free zone, right? Because what happens then, what if you're a parent of a tween or a teen with the phone? The second you start driving, everyone's like, even your kids, if you're driving their friends, they're all like on their phones and no
Yes.
one's talking to each other, joking around, hanging
Absolutely.
out, whatever, having conversations, right? And they may even be texting each other when they're sitting right next to each
Yeah.
other, right? So, so, that you miss out on that social connection. And I'm not going to say that all, screens are bad, because one of the things that's really important is what impact does it have on that social connection? And so in the car, you just say, look, my car, we don't have the phones. And just watch and see the conversations. It's amazing. Or if it's your kids, right? I love the conversations now that I have with my kids, even on that 10-minute drive to school, right? That you are missing out on if they're just stuck, nose to their screens,
Yeah.
right? And honestly, it's a little trick, right? For if you really want to get your tweens and teens to talk with you, chances are they'll tell you more if you're not looking at them eye to eye, right? If they're in the back seat and they're like, oh yeah, and you're just kind of casually having this conversation, right? Or, my son and my daughter, sometimes, they're having a conversation. I'm just kind of eavesdropping and
That's
listening
right.
in. And you're like, and you find out a lot more,
Yeah,
right?
I have never thought about that. You try to be really intentional eye to eye, but that's so true. There's so much less, almost stress, like you feel like somebody's
Mhm.
judging you, and it's just kind of passive conversation. Very good. I
So
love
yeah,
that.
it's more even for kids, just taking them out. A lot of kids don't necessarily like to hike, but if you go for a walk, right, oftentimes you'll have better conversations when you're kind of side by side, just walking along,
Yeah, yeah.
chit-chatting, as opposed to, kids feeling like, okay, what's going on? Why is mom grilling me? Right?
Why is mom staring at me? I don't understand. Yeah, absolutely. I love that so much. Okay, so what are things we talked about I love the conversation. I love that. I'm gonna take that for myself. Conversation just in the car. You don't have to be face to face and make it feel like such a
Mhm.
serious ordeal. I love that
Yep.
one. What are some other things parents can do to help build a child's mental health, their strength, their development in a better word?
Yeah. So the first thing I'm going to say is actually more to do with your child's diet and lifestyle,
Okay.
right?
I love that.
We have to take your child's mental health in the context of the fact that if they already showing anxiety or separation fears or OCD tendencies, depression, you got to start with their gut and what's going on, and what's going into their bodies, because what most people don't recognize and understand is that the gut microbiome, right, your probiotics in your gut make up to 80 to 90% of all of our serotonin, right,
Wow.
and other
Okay.
neurotransmitters. Now, serotonin, we know when you have depression or anxiety, oftentimes, you're prescribed an SSRI medicine, right, a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, to try to trick your brain into thinking that there's more serotonin around than there actually is, right? So we're addressing this serotonin deficiency or insufficiency. But instead of thinking, oh, I need a medicine for that, which sometimes we do, right? Absolutely.
Sure.
But we want to think, okay, why is that serotonin so low in the first place? And almost always it's because something's going on in the gut, that your probiotics are balanced and they're not making enough serotonin for you. So making sure that we're feeding our gut microbiome. And in fact, there are particular probiotic supplements that are called psychobiotics that help build up optimal levels of serotonin and dopamine. Right
Very good.
now,
Okay.
if your kids are older and they're like mine, and they're going to, the pharmacy or to, the grocery store, they're picking up snacks, you want to teach them and just educate them. They're going to make their choices, but you want them to make informed choices and say, hey, look, you've been telling me that you have all these worries, that you're overwhelmed, that you're stressed, that you can't sleep. Well, some of the foods that you're choosing, they might have an impact, right? Just know, right? Anything with artificial, like you teach them to read the labels. Anything that has artificial, like red dye 3, blue lake, whatever. Yeah, the studies have shown that those can increase worries and attention and focus issues, right? Show them that, teach them how to read the labels and look at, the amount of added sugar that could be really impacting their brain and their gut. And, it's just to educate them, because you're not going to be in control of all of their food choices once they're out of the home, but you can help empower them and educate them so that they can understand, all right, well, I chose to get the Takis and, the unicorn Starbucks drink. And that the next day was horrible. I was stressed, I was
I was
crying, I was angry, I
jittery.
couldn't go outside, right? And so then you help them make that correlation so they know, all right, well, the next time you go out with your friends, what kind of choices do you want to make, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of, educating our kids. Now, the other thing that is really important is that, we as parents need to first learn the tools to manage our own worries, right? So that then we can show our kids how to manage their worries.
Yeah.
And so we want to model that for our kids. It's really important. Parents, kids are going to be able to tell like that when they walk in the door, if you're stressed about something. And if you say, oh, nothing, everything's fine, everything, then they're going to think that's the way they should deal with their stress, right? If they're stressed, then they think, oh, I shouldn't talk about it.
Yeah.
It's okay, mom, everything's fine, right? And so showing them, mom had a really rough day. I'm working through this, right? I'm feeling, kind of anxious. I'm feeling a little upset right now. And then learn some tools, whether it's now cognitive behavioral tools. Not just going to therapy, but you can learn CBT tools, which is the preferred form of therapy for teenagers with anxiety. Um, Learning how to do breath work and mindfulness exercises to get yourself centered again. It's really important when you're kind of stressed and anxious. You got to get out of fight or flight mode, right? When you're in that, like, oh my gosh, I'm so anxious, I'm so worked up, and you think or your child's like that, and you think in that moment that your child can calmly tell you what's going on in their brain,
Yeah.
it's not going to happen, right?
No
So you
reasoning.
need to get out of that alarm state, out of the like, oh my gosh, there's a saber-tooth tiger chasing me, into that, okay, my heart rate's slower, my breath is slower. Now I can process and think, right? And you can do that with breath work and different mindfulness exercises. It's really important. And there are some apps. Some of the apps that I really like, there's one called Oak, like the oak tree. That's a breathing, mindfulness app that actually a 12-year-old kid told me about.
Wow.
I love Insight Timer. Insight Timer it's a free meditation app. There's free meditations from experts around the world, and there's a 5-minute breathing meditation that I will have kids download and save on their phones if they have their phones out. Parents do. I'm like, you know what? 5 minutes, right? If you don't have time for 5 minutes, it's because you don't want to,
That's
right?
right.
We all have time for 5 minutes, right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying an hour of meditation, right? And then, other tools that I would recommend, you know, learning those CBT tools, really important. There's a child psychologist. Her name is Dawn Huebner, and she spells it Huebner. Back in the, like 20 some odd years ago, she wrote a series of quote self-help books called the What to Do series. Her first book was What to Do When You Worry Too Much. It's like a little workbook that you go through. You can do it with your kids. It's amazing, for, maybe younger, like maybe 6 to 8 years of age, all the way maybe to 12 to 13. I use some of the tools in there too. Anyone could use them. You do it with your kids. She's got, books, other books in that series are what to do when you dread your bed, what to do when your temper flares, what to do when you grumble too much. She has a book for older kids, teenagers who want a little more of the science of what's going on in their brain, called Outsmarting Worry. And again, it's very practical. It teaches kids these CBT tools so that We know it's hard to find a therapist right now. I mean, everyone's booked out and, tons of wait lists. So you can learn these tools with your child and they can learn them on their own. And her latest series of books is called the mini books about mighty fears. So anyhow, she's a good friend at this point. I love all of her work. She makes CBT tools accessible to any child and any teenager. So that I would hands out, if you have a child who has worries or behavioral concerns or sleep issues or temper tantrums, then you'll want to get your hands on her books.
Love that. Very good. Yeah, absolutely. I have parents looking for things all the time, so I'll definitely
Yeah.
add that to, my collection, my library of references that I give out to people. I love that. Now, I want to say you talked about the gut, which I love, and we talked about screen time and how it's addictive. Something I found incredibly interesting, you posted about sugar intake and how
Mm,
it has just skyrocketed with our generation. And
yep.
I don't remember the exact number, but it's something crazy like back in the day, they used to have 5 pounds of sugar in a year. And now it's like 50 pounds of sugar in a year.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it's
there's also, if you look at it per day, right? This is now like, 200 years ago, sugar is not like the all evil, right? I mean, people love sugar, but there are things like honey. And so 200 years ago, we were eating, around 2 teaspoons of added white sugar a day, things like breads and, whatever baked goods. Nowadays, that number, the average American has 17 teaspoons of white sugar a day. Um, Kids are worse. They have about 19 teaspoons of sugar a day. And the American Heart Association, now knowing how much sugar causes, is linked with the risk of virtually every chronic disease in adulthood,
Mhm.
recommends that kids get no more than 6 teaspoons of added sugar a day. Now you think, oh, well, how could they be getting that, right? Well, I'll tell you, before I started looking at labels, I would buy this, really great organic vanilla Greek yogurt for my kids for
Yeah,
breakfast, thinking, oh, they're the probiotics, they're getting protein, they're getting healthy fats, right? Because I would buy the full fat one.
that's
And
right.
so one day I'm like, I looked at the label and I was like, oh my gosh, wow, there's 31 grams of added sugar in one serving of this vanilla Greek yogurt. Now, what is 31 grams? Well, one teaspoon is about 4 grams. So that's right there. What is that? Almost 8 teaspoons, right?
Wow. Okay.
So I was sending my kids off to school with like eight
Yeah.
teaspoons of white
Yeah, and
sugar.
they're
And
like,
then you think,
"Yeah!"
right. And then you wonder, like, okay, why can't so many kids sit still in class and fidget and, have a hard time being still in their bodies and their brains? And then they're crashing at lunch because now the
Yeah,
sugar high has become a sugar low. And then, you put in the yogurt squeezy tube because you think, okay, that's protein in it. But then that has now another 5 teaspoons of sugar. And then like this roller coaster, right? So if we get our kids off of that sugar roller coaster, it's amazing the behavioral changes you can see and the things that we thought were ADHD, ODD, I mean, whatever initials, like you name it. Now, I'm not going to say that maybe they don't have those, but things are so much better,
yeah.
right? So we don't want to make life an uphill battle for ourselves or for our kids. So, I look at it not as we gotta look at it not as depriving our kids, but really giving their bodies and brains a chance to see how can they feel, how good can they feel if we make these little tweaks in their diet.
Absolutely. Yeah. The labels, the crazy thing, like the FDA and the food, all these associations, they can trick you with those labels. So you have to be
Oh yeah.
extremely careful. They're
Mhm.
allowed to call things that they're not. It's really tricky. So, yes, pay attention to the labels. I'm still working on that myself because it can be incredibly tricky and hard to read. So, what we talked about this a little bit already, but what might self care look like for a child?
So, self-care for a child really it really comes down to something called self-regulation. How can we regulate, kind of get out of that fight or flight, regulate our brains and our bodies, right? And so it's helping kids identify when they're getting into that overwhelmed state so that they can say to their teacher, to their parents, to whomever, I need a little break. I need a little time away from myself, right? Call it a timeout, right? I mean, a lot of people have negative connotations with timeouts, but I love timeouts for
Yeah, that's
me,
what I'm
right?
saying. I
You
would
know,
take a time out as an adult.
that's
I
right.
would
You
love
can
it.
say, look, that like the one of the most important things a child can learn how to do is say, I need a little break right now, right? Then they go do whatever breathing, maybe go for a little walk, get some fresh air. Then they come back and then they're regulated and they can move on with the day. I mean, I think that, and for adults, I'm like, that is one of the best things that we can learn how to do instead of I mean, you would never sit and want your kid to stay in a situation that's just mounting more and more and more stress. You want them to be able to say, look, why would I stay in this situation that is, not serving me right now? Yes, I need to stay in the classroom, but how about I take a little break, on the side, breathe, or maybe, have a chance to go to the bathroom, get some water on my face, and then I come back.
Yeah, I love that. Giving them, like I said, those tools, letting them
Mhm.
know, you know what, if it gets too much, take a break, go to the bathroom. I
Yep.
love that. Okay. I always ask my guests, what does self care look like for you?
So self-care for me has looked like different things at different
Absolutely.
times in my life, right?
I feel like they're, yeah,
But
I
I
feel
would
like they're
say,
seasons.
yeah, yeah. Um, right now, self-care for me means prioritizing sleep. Like I am often in bed before the kids. I mean, I used to look at their bedtime as, yes, I get an hour or 2 or 3 of quiet,
Yeah.
right? I go to bed at like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, but I still have to get up at,
Yeah.
5:30, 6 in the morning to get myself ready, get them ready, get breakfast ready, get them out the door, drive them to school, right? So time doesn't shift just because I want that extra quiet.
That's
And
right.
so
Sadly.
now, I am looking, I start getting antsy around like 9 o'clock, like I need to get to bed. And so when I get to bed on time, when I get that 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night, I am so much calmer, happier, more regulated, not as snappy with the kids, not as, irritated with my husband, right? I mean, everything just goes more smoothly. So, like, why wouldn't I want that for myself?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and you think, oh, I want that extra bit of time. Well, that extra little bit of time to yourself where you're falling asleep on the couch or like maybe having another glass of wine. I mean, it doesn't get you more peace and calm the next day.
Yeah.
Right.
I
And
love
so
that.
anyhow, that right now, that is my priority.
I love that. Of anyone I've had, no one has said sleep, and that's such a high priority. We should make that such a priority. So I
Yes.
love that
Yep.
you pointed that out. I think it gets a label of being lazy. Some people are like, I'll go for a hike and I'll do this, but I love that. You get that quiet
Yeah.
time in bed and
Yeah.
really
Oh,
as an
yeah.
adult,
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
you can't get anything better than that. I love it.
Yep.
That's a great one. Okay, last thing, and I feel like this is super important. Other than your friend that we talked about earlier, which I am for sure gonna put that, like I said, on my resources shelves, do you have any other good resources for parents maybe navigating this area or trying to learn a little bit more about how to control their child and their mental health and well-being?
So, yes, there's Don Huebner's books. I do recommend, looking at some of these apps. There's something called tapping, emotional freedom technique. There's an app called the tapping solution that uses, acupressure points and,
Yeah,
and different affirmations that really also have to reset the nervous system. So that's a great resource.
okay.
Right now I'm just looking up right now, there's an organization that I'm actually gonna post about in honor of my friend, because what I worry about is the kids in crisis right now.
Yeah,
How do we help them get out of crisis, especially kids who are where you're worried,
yeah,
that they may really, want to end their lives.
yes.
One of the things that came out through the pandemic was that, well, I mean, it's not even just our teenagers, right? I mean, in the 10 to 15-year age group, during the pandemic, there were statistics about, COVID being the 10th leading cause of death for our kids, 10 to 15, this younger
Mm,
age group. So then I looked at the numbers that the CDC was listing as, for other leading causes of death. The eighth leading cause of death in that group was suicide in that young group. In
Okay,
that young
wow.
group. And then for our youth or our older teenagers and young adults, it's the second leading cause of death.
Wow. Goodness
Second leading cause of
gracious.
death, 17 times more, 23 times more in young adults than your risk of dying from, let's say, the flu, right? And then number one is accidental injury, which we know, I mean, that's often from the risk-taking behaviors,
Right,
right, that are related to your anxiety and
right,
depression.
right.
So the other resources, if your kids are really in crisis and your teens are in crisis, there is a national suicide prevention lifeline that you just call 988. Okay, 988. There are resources on the American Psychological Association. There's a National Suicide Prevention Awareness website. So all of these, we really just want to make ourselves aware because I always tell parents and kids knowledge is power. And, getting that knowledge and becoming empowered is one of the best ways not to have fear around mental health concerns, but to understand that we can make choices and we can empower our kids to make choices. And we want to support them in all of that.
Absolutely. I love that so, so much. Dr. Song, I cannot thank you enough for taking time out of your day to join us. It is such a pleasure and it is an honor to get to share this time with you. I learned so much. So I cannot thank you enough for joining us and just giving all this expertise, all this advice. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Townsend. It's been an honor.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, I tell every guest, when you come on here, you basically signed a contract that you've gained a new friend. I love to keep up with my people, so we will be in touch. Please keep in touch. Let me know how it is going in California. And again, just thank you so, so much.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Absolutely. All right. Have a good morning.
Okay.
We'll see you later.
Thanks. Okay. Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you'd like to hear the rest of this interview, visit patreon.com/TownsendTmusic. And don't forget, you can also watch the interviews on our YouTube channel at Townsendtmusic YouTube.
Okay, guys, if you're in the market to buy or sell, I have the perfect company for you. Clark & Co. Realty is located in the Benton, Bryant, Arkansas area, but they're able to serve you no matter where you're located in the state. They've streamlined the process of buying or selling a home to make it so much easier. They have a team of industry experts that make sure you have access from anything you can think of. I'm talking from local home inspectors to painters to gardeners and so much more, just to provide you with the best service possible. They're dedicated to providing the most up-to-date market data in the area. And I think the coolest part is if you go on their website, you can use their easy-to-use fast property search. You can even create a custom market report to see what's active, under contract, and sold in your neighborhood. Their team is made up of caring, knowledgeable professionals that work around the clock to help you with the process of buying and selling your home. So again, if you're in the market to buy or sell, Clark & Co. Realty is definitely the company for you. Tell them Townsend sent you. Let's be honest. I think we could all use somebody to talk to every now and then. Healing Path Counseling in Conway, Arkansas is 100% my go-to when it comes to therapy. Wendy Blackwood has more credentials than letters in the alphabet. She's won awards for her outstanding services and has a whole page of board memberships. Basically, she knows what she's doing. She works hard to help equip you with the tools needed to live your best life. She even offers a variety of services, including, but not limited to, cognitive behavioral therapy, technology-assisted counseling, relationship counseling, and EMDR. Trust me, I know therapy can be intimidating at first, but let me assure you, Wendy does her best to make you comfortable and find the best solutions and plans for you. Trust me, don't wait to make the call. Give Wendy Blackwood at Healing Path Counseling a call today. Get started on the best version of you.